Lecture 4, continuing with the General Code of Conduct, Part D. With regards to furnishing of advice, there are certain duties that you need to keep in mind. So before you give advice to a client, you need to ensure that the advice is suitable. So how do you make sure that the advice is suitable? There are certain things you have to do. So you have to have regard to the client's financial situation, their product experience, and their objectives. So it's very different if you are giving advice to someone who knows financial products and someone who doesn't. So they need different levels of explanation, and their objectives and risk profiles are also very different. So for each client, you conduct an analysis. You collect all their data and you conduct an analysis, and you see exactly which product would be best suited for your client. Once you've done that, you identify the client's risk profile and you look at their legal and contractual limitations, and you can suggest a product to the client. Once you've done this, you need to disclose certain details. So you can go through these details. It contains charges, premiums, tax implications, and things like that. So go through the different details that you need to disclose to the client once you have furnished advice. So you need to try ensure that your client understands what you're doing. So if you're giving a replacement product or a new product, the rules are very different. So for example, if you look at a replacement product, you need to notify the supplier of the previous product, and you need to make sure that you give a proper comparison of the two products before the client makes a decision. You need to ensure that the client can understand. So if, for example, you cannot do an analysis because you do not have all of the relevant information, you need to let the client know the extent of the information that you have and why you couldn't do a full analysis, and see if you can get more information from the client. Very importantly, if you look at the last point, the client doesn't always need or always actually listen. So if the client elects a different product or decides not to take your advice, you need to advise the client of the risks involved, and also you need to consider whether the product that the client has chosen is actually appropriate for them, considering their needs and objectives. With regards to the record of advice, it's very important that the FSP always keeps a record, and in particular, you need to keep a summary of all information on which the advice was based. Which products did you consider, and which products did you recommend? And you need to explain why you recommended specific products. When you are recommending a replacement product, you need to put a comparison of the fees and charges, terms, conditions, liabilities, waiting periods. A whole list of information needs to be given, but most importantly, you need to say why that replacement product was considered more suitable than the previous product. Also, you need to provide the client with a copy of that record. With regards to custody and of funds with financial products, an FSP who receives the funds keeps the money from the client in a separate account. It's generally a trust account or a company account. And any interest that accrues in that account belongs to the client. So it is for the benefit of the owner of the funds. So you need to show the client exactly what funds of theirs you hold in trust and what the interest that they have accumulated is. With regards to risk management, an FSP needs to make sure that they have all the necessary resources, procedures, and systems to eliminate as far as possible any financial risk to the client. They need to have internal control measures. Generally, you have a 3-line defense system where people are checking and rechecking and even rechecking each other's work to ensure that no mistakes are made that would cause a client's loss. Over and above this, you also have guarantees or professional indemnities. When dealing with an FSP, there are certain codes that you need to follow with regards to advertising. So you've all heard financial services providers advertising on the radio or on television, and they always disclose that they are financial services providers. That is an actual requirement with regards to advertising. So if you have a look at the advertising requirements, very importantly, it may not contain fraudulent, untrue, misleading promises, statements, or forecasts. When you give performance data, so if you're discussing how your fund has worked in the past, you always need to reference the source and the date of the forecast that you're giving. Any illustrations or hypothetical data must have a reasonable prospect of being met. And it must also be very clear that these illustrations and forecasts are used for illustrative purposes and they're not a guarantee. You can never guarantee anything really when it comes to the financial market. So you need to ensure that your clients know that this is an illustration. When you deal with the risk, you must warn people that about the risk of buying and selling financial products, and the risks are not always displayed properly in advertising, but you need to do as best you can. So when it talks about telephone advertising, you need to keep an actual logged record of the advertising, and that should be kept for 45 days. If you look in the end there, it talks about radio adverts. Radio adverts need to provide the business name of the FSP, and also you have to say an authorized registered financial services provider.